Hello, if you are with me, can you just put up a chat? Let me be sure that I'm audible. Just put up a chat on the comment section. I want to be sure that we're together before I start. Can you hear me? Am I audible? Am I audible? Just put up a chat so that I'll be sure that you are not missing me. Okay, so we'll soon start. Others will meet up with us or they'll watch the recording when we are done. This was an impromptu arrangement, but I know the recordings will still be available for those who are not with us at the moment. And what we want to discuss basically is volunteering. That's what we want to look at. What does it mean, and should I volunteer, and what are the principles of volunteering? So that's essentially what we are looking at today. Okay. So I'll soon start. So if you have any question, just put it down there so that we also use, although I have a guide that we'll use for the discussion. Any question you have, just put it up on the chat. Let's discuss, let's talk about it. And for those of you in Nigeria, happy Independence Day. I think we'll call this Independence Day chat. Independence Day edition, Independence Day chat. So it would be good for us to discuss this because volunteering is something we hear every time within the society, in the religious organizations, outside the religious organizations. So we need to know what it is and how we should approach it in principle. So if you have any questions, just put it up in the next few minutes. I'll start. In the next 1 minute, I'll start. Whoever that comes in after that can always access the recording later. Okay, so we are starting now. So essentially, what is volunteering? We hear about it every time, especially for those of us in the medical writing industry. We hear about volunteer medical writers, volunteer this, volunteer that. So, and possibly you must have heard so many people share their opinions on what exactly it is and how it should be done, but you don't actually know how to go about it. So that's what we want to discuss, because over the past 1 year, I've managed a whole lot of volunteers who have worked with me. I've also been a volunteer myself. In fact, I'm still a volunteer. I'm still a volunteer somewhere. So what we want to look at is, does it have any benefits, or is it exploitation, Is it something you should undertake, or is it something you should just look away whenever you see such, maybe on your LinkedIn feed? Is this something you should consider? So, but then when we look around, not just within the communications industry, within the world, within the corporate world, there's always that need to have people decide to offer their services free of charge. That's basically what volunteering. That means you are just offering your service, not in exchange for money. But that's what people usually wonder: why should I do that? Should I really go through that route? So, and that's what we want to tackle this evening, just in a few minutes. So, I'm Dr. Zoka CSDK. I'm the team lead of the ACE Medical Consulting and Communication Services. So, this is our official YouTube page. And if you look through our page, you see that basically we are interested in health literacy and medical writing. So that's what you'll find on our page. So, but then volunteering affects anyone. So no matter the field you belong to. So this is more or less a general topic, but it still affects us, those of us within the medical communications industry. For those who are just joining, just if you have any question, just put it on the chat. I'll tackle it as I go along. But I have a guide that we'll use for this discussion. Now, personally, my first volunteer experience was many years ago, more than a decade ago. That was when I was a youth corper. For those of us in Nigeria, I was doing my 1 year mandatory youth service. That should be the first official, I'll call that my first official volunteer experience, because as a student, we went for outreaches and a whole lot of that. And that was with an NGO. And it so much helped me, that experience. It was an NGO that used to organize health outreaches in rural areas. I remember I traveled to 2 different states with them then, and I benefited a lot. I wasn't paid, but then the experience of moving around with them, the experience of traveling with them, the experience of seeing them organize programs, I picked up a lot of lessons that I still use up to today, lessons that you can't even quantify in terms of money. So that's one thing about volunteering, and that's what we'll discuss as we go ahead. So in essence, what's the definition of volunteering? It means time willingly given for the common good and without financial gain. So that means you've identified that this thing is a worthy cause, but then you are giving your time, you are giving your services, not in exchange for money, you are just giving it for the common good. So, and that common good is not just that you are helping. Sometimes people assume that volunteering means that they're trying to help another person. No, for the common good, including you, the volunteer. So the volunteer gains, the person that volunteering for gains, then the community or whoever that project is going to serve also gains. Let me take an example from our own, although we are not an NGO, but then we run a medical communications agency, we have a health library, and we have volunteer writers. They write, I review, and we publish. Now, that process of writing and getting their writing reviewed is a whole lot of learning for them. Because for an article to move through that raw draft to get to the point of being polished enough to be published, a whole lot of energy, a whole lot of effort, a whole lot of teaching goes into that. And it's practical learning, which is very, very important. So they learn through the process, then they get to publish the article. They have their name attached to the article. So wherever that article gets to, whether US, UK, Canada, wherever, it goes with their name. So they gain the publicity from that. Then the health library also gains because their work helps to populate the health library, to increase the number of articles on the health library. So they gain, the Help Life Begins. In addition, they also add the article to their portfolio. So that's another gain. These are things that you can't really quantify in terms of money. So when we talk about the common good, the volunteer is not just helping. It's different from volunteering, it's different from helping. Because I can decide to, maybe if I see a beggar on the road, to help the beggar, give the beggar something. I may not even see that person again. I may not have gain any benefit from doing that. I may not. I'm using me because I know that God can decide to bless you because of that. But then that's different from volunteering. You are gaining something from the process. The person you are volunteering is gaining something from the process. The recipients of the work that you are doing also gain from the process. So, like the definition says, is for the common good and without financial gain. Now, volunteering can be as individuals. That's the one most of us are aware that volunteer as individuals. But we know that sometimes even organizations can volunteer. Maybe they will give out some of their staff. They will just give out some of their staff maybe to do a particular thing, maybe for the community. So that's the organization now using their own veto power to use their employees for a cause that is for the common good. So the organization won't gain anything from that process in terms of finance, but they may gain maybe recognition or any other thing on that process. So the organization gains the visibility. That's actually what NGOs do. They go for the projects, they use the projects to gain visibility. Sometimes they gain from the project, sometimes they may not gain. We assume that they don't usually gain. That's the assumption anyway. Then the volunteers that join them also gain. Because most times you see people, they'll join some of those programs, they'll put it on their LinkedIn that they're part of this group, or they may even take pictures from there, use it for their content. And by doing that, they're building visibility for themselves. Now, that visibility in the next 5 or 10 years may amount to something that, assuming they were paid for when they did that project, it wouldn't have gotten to that level. So that's one thing about that. So I've said that it can be at individual level, it can be at organizational level. Now, still talking about volunteering, it should not be exploitative in any way, in that an organization should not, okay, maybe they have the funds to do something, but because they think some people can come just to do it free, they will not decide to do it for them, to get people to do that. Or maybe they consider when they get the volunteers, they put them under intense pressure. Like I usually tell people that volunteering is very optional. You can walk in today and walk out tomorrow. So a volunteer shouldn't be restricted in any way, unlike what you have in an employee. When you have an employee, that's when you have all the rules and regulations. That doesn't mean that there shouldn't be some level of rules guiding the organization. There should be. But then a volunteer should have that choice of walking away whenever they. Thank you, Basiru Ismail. You're welcome. So a volunteer should always have that choice. So one thing you should consider whenever you are trying to volunteer your services, what's the structure of that organization? And ideally, there should be a guideline for every volunteering activity so that you know what you are going in for and know that for this thing, I can always decide to not to do it again. So it shouldn't be exploitative. Then whatever you are volunteering for should have substantial benefits to the society. So anytime I see that kind of call, maybe on LinkedIn, oh, we need volunteers, one thing I look at for is what exactly do you want to do? Why do you need volunteers? So whatever project they need a volunteer for should have benefits for the society. That's what is when I look at the benefit, I can now decide, okay, let me give out my time for this. And it should also provide significant benefits to the volunteers themselves, significant non-financial benefits. Let me make it clear. So every volunteering process should provide some level of benefit to you, either that you are getting more exposed, or you are getting more visible, or building your skills. Let me still, I'll continue to use our own processes as an example. We have writers that write articles. And I always make sure that whenever those articles are published, they are published in their name, because I know that their name being there is a major benefit to them. So, as a you're welcome, Vasily. So, as a volunteer, you can't go and volunteer maybe for a medical communication service that what you do will not be attributed to you. Then it's of no benefit to you. So, always make sure that there is some level of non-financial significant benefit, that you have significant non-financial benefit to you. Then let's talk about volunteer rights. You should also know that volunteers have rights, even though you are not an employee. Although the practice of volunteering is not usually regulated by law most times, although the organizations are, every good organization should have registered with the government in Nigeria, should have registered with the Corporate Affairs Commission. So there's still some level of regulations. But then volunteers don't have, the practice of volunteering is not as regulated as the practice of having an employee. That's why you don't have volunteers association. Like what you know, those of us in Nigeria will have an issue now about paying gas and oil workers and this. No, volunteers are not under any form of organization like that. So you can't go on strike, you can't go and protest about that. So, and that's one of the challenges why sometimes it appears people are exploited. Now, one is that you have to have information about the organization you are volunteering for. Don't just see something online and jump on it. Do your due diligence. Every serious organization now in this age, in this 21st century, must have an online presence. So check Facebook, check Twitter, check whether they have a website, understand the organization. And if you can't find, ask them before you jump in. Don't just, some people, they'll just tell you, will give you t-shirt, will give you cap and just jump on the train. No, understand the organization you are volunteering for. Ask them for a job description. Yes, even as a volunteer, you should have a job description. We have volunteers and we have a guideline. That's have a 3-page guideline on what they're supposed to do. So even before starting whatever they're doing, they know exactly what they're coming in to do. They know exactly what they're coming in to do. So you should have an idea of your job description. Because they shouldn't tell you we're going for an outreach. You don't know what the outreach is all about. You don't know where they're going. You don't even know the scope of the outreach. So you should know all these things before going. You should know to whom you are accountable and to whom you should report. So every organization should have a level of some organogram, so that as you are stepping in, even before you join them, you know this is the person, this is my lead, this is my unit lead, or this is overall lead for this organization. That so that if you run into any problems along the way, you know who to communicate to. Then you should be recognized for your contribution. As a volunteer, you should be recognized for as a valuable member of the team. Even though you are not being paid, but that doesn't mean you are less than an employee. So if you've joined to do a project, you should be recognized for your contribution in a non-financial way. If they decide to give you a stipend, good. But always know that for those of us that are just joining, always know that the basic thing about being a volunteer is that you are not paid. I remember once that we advertised for volunteer writers and some people submitted their CV and we went through the screening process. Towards the last stage of the screening, one of them sent me a mail to ask whether she would be paid. She was going to be paid. And I actually laughed when I saw the email. It was by virtue of the name volunteer. You know that it's not a paid. That's the basic thing you have to know. Whenever. But if they now have a stipend for you, sometimes some people will say, we'll give you transport, we'll give you this feeding. That's an additional thing. But just know that there's no financial attachment to being a volunteer. Then you should be supported and supervised in your role. Even if you go maybe for a medical outreach, you have to be supervised as a volunteer because maybe you work with them in the theater. If something happens, if you do something wrong, remember that you are liable. Remember that you are liable. That's why you have to. Okay, Chocolate Boy said hi. Okay, you're welcome. Remember that you are liable. for whatever you do there. So you have to, don't just jump on a volunteer role and start working. No, you have to be supervised. Then a volunteer, you have as a volunteer, you have a right to say no if you are being exploited. And that's why I said in the beginning, as a volunteer, you can walk in today and walk out tomorrow. That's the only benefit of being a volunteer. So you have to know when to say no if you are being exploited. Then you also need to be advised if there are relevant organizational policies that affect your role as a volunteer. Some organizations are complex. So if you're, for any reason, you are joining such an organization, find out, do they have any policies that might affect your role as a volunteer? You may need to know that if they have any intricate policy that maybe tomorrow it becomes an issue for you, someone may raise it as an issue for you, you will need to understand that before going on that journey with them. So that's about volunteer rights. That's what we discussed. So know that even as a volunteer, you are not paid, that you have a right. Then principles of volunteering. So volunteer rights, will discuss that. You have rights as a volunteer. So let's go over to the next one. So what are the principles of volunteering? Remember we said it's for the common good. Now, volunteering benefits the community, the organizer or the organization, whoever, and the volunteer. Community, the organization, and the volunteer. So it's like a tripod. So if for any reason you don't find your own benefits in this tripod, then you may need to step out. Then volunteering is always a matter of choice. Nobody is forced to volunteer. And when you finally volunteer, don't behave as if you were forced into that role. You know, that's what I usually tell our writers. If on your own you saw the advert and you decided to come in to join us, don't come in and start behaving as if you were forced. So once you make up your mind that I want to do this, go ahead and put in your best. Sometimes you go for outreaches. Like I said, I started volunteering very, very early in my career life. You go for outreaches, you see fellow volunteers that came from all over the nation with you. And some people, you see that what some people are just interested in what they will eat, or this, or some people go and be hanging out under the tree with some other people instead of doing the work they came to do. And that's very wrong. You made that choice to be a volunteer. So once you volunteer, whether as a writer or as an editor, you do it as if you are being paid, because you're actually being paid. You are laying up treasures for your future career work. Let me give an example. I did a 30-week unpaid internship, medical writing and editing internship with Clarity. I wasn't paid a dime, but that was where I built my medical writing foundation. And that was where I laid the foundation for my portfolio, the portfolio I have now. And that was my intention as I went in there. So I wasn't thinking about the money. I was thinking about raising my portfolio. At the same time as I was improving my portfolio, I was also helping them populate their health library. So they benefited, I benefited. The people that will eventually read those articles is also a benefit to them. And I never for once, during the period I did that, I never for once behaved as if I wasn't paid. Because when I did that volunteering, they used to have a tag every week. You have to write an article every week. You pick the topic on Friday, submit it on Friday. I never missed any of my targets. I never, for the 30 weeks I spent there. But then sometimes you look around and see your fellow interns. You see some people that maybe in 3 weeks, they've not even written one article. Because for some of them, maybe they think I'm not being paid, so why should I stress myself? That is wrong. Volunteering is a matter of choice. So once you step in, you have to do what you are supposed to do. Now, volunteering is an activity that is unpaid and not undertaken for the receipt of salary. I've said it before, pension, government allowance, or honorarium. Even when you finally come close to the organization and you notice that they have the money, don't say, okay, because, oh, so you people, you actually have this money and you don't want to pay me. No, you signed up for a volunteer role. Do it to the best of your ability. And who knows what will come out from there. volunteering is unpaid. Now, volunteering is a vehicle for individuals or groups to address human, environmental, and social needs. So see yourself as someone who is solving problems. Like I mentioned my medical writing and editing internship. As I was building my portfolio, I also saw myself as someone who was solving problems. I was writing on health topics for people to read and change their behaviors. Even right now, I'm still a volunteer reviewer for a brand. And when I review, I don't review as if that I don't do it in a way that will show that I'm not being paid for this. I do it the very way I review articles for my own brand. I do it meticulously. In fact, sometimes I review over and over again. So you won't see maybe when I review article for them or when I review the one that I'm paid for, you won't see any difference. Because what I'm actually doing, your expression is fluid. Oh, Polano, can you throw more light? Because what I see whenever I have an article before me, what I visualize, I always visualize that end user of the article, and that's the average person on the street. That's the average person that would want to gain benefit from that article. That's what I look at, not the money. Okay. Okay, your expression is fluid there. I love your flow. Okay, let's continue. Thank you very much. Then volunteering respects the rights, dignity, and culture of others. So when you are volunteering, don't say, they're paying me, let me just do this thing anyhow. No, don't do it anyhow, because as you are doing it anyhow, you are trampling on somebody's rights and dignity. You are trampling on somebody's culture, the way they do their own things. So let me give an example. I'm very detailed and always I schedule my activities. So if I say I'm doing this thing by tomorrow, I always want to do it. So if you now decide to volunteer with me and possibly you have an article to write and you decide not to, and I say, okay, submit it by tomorrow, and you decide to submit it in the next 2 days, you are trampling on my culture. So so even as a volunteer, you have to respect the culture of the organization you are volunteering for. Don't say, they're not paying me, let me do anyhow. So that's one thing you have to understand. Now, for organizations, I believe probably we also have people who may need volunteers. There is possible. Before you ask for someone to join you to be a volunteer, first of all, you have to ask yourself, am I looking for these people just for the purpose of saving money or salary? Now, if that's your intention, that is wrong. What I'm trying to say is that if you have the funds to actually pay workers to do that work, don't try to, because you think that maybe some people don't have jobs, they're unemployed, that because of that you just have to get them on board. No. Now, why NGOs and most startups use volunteers is, let me stay for NGOs. Sometimes the funding they have may be smaller than the vision or the scope of the work in their hands. So if they decide to go just without funding, they won't be able to make impact the way they want to. The same thing with startups. They have a big vision. You want to accomplish much, but then you don't yet have the funds to do that. That's where volunteers come in. So in essence, what I'm saying is that by the time that startup picks up, or the NGO, maybe they receive more funds, they shouldn't just seek for volunteers just for the sake of saving money. That's the wrong principle. Then another thing for those that also have paid workers is, have paid workers within the organizations ever carried out their work? Or, there are some organizations that some jobs that may be considered menial, and some people may not want to do it. Is it that they just leave those jobs that are dirty in quotes for volunteers to come and do because their paid workers won't be able to do that? If that is the principle they're running on, it's also wrong. So if you are bringing in volunteers, you are bringing them to augment what your paid workers are doing, not for them to do jobs that people may not naturally want to do because you think maybe they're desperate, they don't have jobs. That's why that are coming in. Another question you should ask yourself, will the placement of volunteers in this role add value to the organization? Don't just gather people just for gathering sake to make up your numbers. Sometimes people just gather them for the sake of pictures. Just gather a crowd of volunteers that they are not even adding to what the organization is doing. So will the placement of volunteers in this role add value to the organization? Let me also use our own case as an example. Usually there's a limit to number of volunteers you can take at a point. And most times after doing that, you still find people sending mails that will want to join. I usually tell them, please wait. When we have that opportunity, you join us as a writer. Why? I don't just want a situation where I'll just blow, maybe say we'll have 50 volunteers and all of them are dormant because I can't control them. So that is not proper. So don't just add people just for adding sake. Add them because you think that as at this moment, I have a role for them. I have something for them to do. And also, that's why I also mentioned that wherever you join as a volunteer, you should also add value. Add value. Whenever I review an article or write an article pro bono, I always add value. I don't look at the cost, the financial cost. I look at the value, the end user. So always think of that end user. If you have any question, ask her because we're almost at the end of this. Then what are your responsibilities as a volunteer? I've mentioned that most of the things I've said before are within this, but let's just say it for us to understand better. One is that you have to be reliable. And that's why as you are joining, you have to ask them, what's the guidelines for this role? Let me use my first volunteer experience. That was with Pro Health International. When you come in, they'll tell you in the mornings, you have to wake up by 6. We do morning devotion for 1 hour. 7 is for dinner. By 8 o'clock, we're on your way. 7 is for breakfast. By 8 o'clock, we're on our way to the site. Now, don't join that kind of organization. By 8 o'clock, you are still sleeping. That means you are not reliable. That means they can't even count on you because they don't know, possibly the next day you wake up by 9. So as a volunteer, despite the fact that you are not paid, you should be reliable. Then you should be able to respect the privacy and confidentiality of the organization. As a volunteer, you get to know some things that an outsider will not know. Let me use our own for an example. Most of our volunteers, I give them, at some point, I give them access to a LinkedIn business page to publish the articles. Now, that's like giving them inside knowledge of what's happening on that page, even though I give them access for maybe 48 hours to get that done. But that's not something that you should violate, even as a volunteer. So you should respect that privacy and confidentiality. You should carry out your role as specified in the job description. So whatever they say you should do, don't ever get to that point you say, am I being paid? No. Just do it as you specified, as is specified. And also know that you're accountable to your own actions. Yes, don't think because you're a volunteer, then other people, they will have to take responsibility for your actions and inactions. No. Even though you are not paid, you are still accountable for whatever you do, even though you have to do it under supervision. I usually tell our writers, you are the author, I'm just the reviewer. So the bulk of responsibility for this article is on your head as the author. You take that responsibility, you take the credit at the end of the day. And if there is anything that goes bad, if anything goes bad also, you take that. So I want them to take that front row seat, whenever it comes to whatever they're doing. Then you have to be committed to the project organization you are working for. Be very committed. In fact, if you're a good volunteer, sometimes you may even need to go outside your call of duty. There was a volunteer we had recently. She just came in as a writer. And at some point, she just said that she wanted to manage her LinkedIn page. I allowed her, I granted her access, and she did that for 3 months before she finally left. So that shows commitment. It wasn't what she came in for, but she saw another opportunity. And of course, that opportunity helped her to learn. So, so you can actually go beyond your call of duty as long as the organization allows you. Then try as much as possible to undertake orientation and training as requested. If there's any training for volunteers, please join. Like in our own, we normally do monthly meetings, and I usually say that that meeting is mandatory. Why? Because you need to understand what the organization is doing. If not, you may go and do the wrong thing. So just say, don't say, am I an employee? Why are they calling me for a meeting? No, go and learn so that you understand what the organization is all about. Now, a volunteer can ask for support or assistance when you need it. And please, not financial support. You are not going to volunteer for them to start helping you financially. So don't volunteer with that intent. But maybe at some point you may need other help, maybe recommendation for something else, or maybe you need to upgrade your skill, something of that nature. You can always ask for that support. And for every good organization, of course, they will give you that support. Then always know that you have to carry out the work you've agreed to do responsibly and under ethics. Make sure you maintain ethics. So if you're in the health care field, remember the ethics of your profession. If you're a lawyer that is volunteering for an organization, don't go outside the scope of the ethics of your profession. I know the ethics of my profession, and no matter where I find myself, I maintain that whether I'm paid or I'm not paid, that ethics, it guides me whatever I do. So always ensure that. Then make sure you give notice before you leave. Now, one thing I've noticed in this era is that people are losing soft skills, especially communication skills. People are gradually losing. I don't know whether it's because of social media or what, that sometimes somebody may just decide to go silent. Maybe you're in an organization and you are supposed to do some things, you just decide to just be quiet. You don't respond to emails, you don't respond to WhatsApp messages, and you just leave it like that. Some people are like that. Please don't be that kind of volunteer. You should always know when you are okay, when you are saturated. When I did my own internship, when I got to my 30th week, I knew I was saturated. I gave them 2 weeks notice that I was leaving on so and so they had all the time to prepare my certificate and recommendation letter. So give notice before you leave. Give timely notice. And if you have any problems along the way that may make you not to carry out your responsibility, communicate. Don't assume that people will know. People have so much that they're doing that they may not actually know what you are going through. So communicate and always give notice before you leave. All right. I think we've been able to go through what you need. So now you know what you need to know, whether you should volunteer or not. It's left for you. So you have to check whether you have the time, whether there is something in that organization that you have to benefit, whether it's a worthy cause. It must be a worthy cause for you to even decide to give your time. Like throughout tomorrow, I'm volunteering somewhere, throughout from morning to evening. I'm giving out my services free somewhere because I've considered that this is worth my time. So always consider that whether this is what this is what you should give out your time to, and make sure you benefit from the process. My 30-week unpaid internship wasn't a waste. I benefited from the process. Some of the ones I'm still doing now, some few volunteer activities I'm still doing, they're also beneficial to me. So these are things you should consider. But never get to that point of saying, no, I should not volunteer. It's part and parcel. In fact, that's why in your CV, on your CV, even on LinkedIn, you have the section for volunteering activities. So important that some people may not want to work with you unless they see that. Because what it shows, if you can volunteer, it shows that what volunteering shows, it shows how much, the extent to which you can go if money is not involved. If everything you do is tagged or tied around money, then there's a problem. That means anytime that money doesn't come, you just drop your tools. So most organizations will actually want to see that on your CV. That's even one other reason why you have to do that. And if you're in the medical writing field, that's a very beautiful way of building your portfolio. So don't just stay and be waiting for clients. Imagine it's possible that maybe you saw a volunteering opportunity 6 months ago, you refused. 6 months down the line, you've not added anything to your portfolio. So you've wasted the 6 months. So you should have taken that opportunity. So when, as you are waiting for the paid employment, these ones come along and you have the time, do that. Use that to build up your skills. There's no volunteer writer that comes in to join us that lives the same. No way. There's no way. Because the process of reviewing the articles, there's no way you can come in and live the same way. There's a whole lot of learning that goes into that process. So that's for them, is a plus for them wherever they go to there. And also it helps them to understand, like, some of the things I do now in structuring our processes, I learned them from Clarity when I was doing my internship. That was where I learned how to manage articles, how to organize articles, and how to do some of these things. So it's a learning process. Every volunteer activity is a learning process. So you shouldn't listen to some bad advisors. You know, sometimes I come across such people, they say, don't volunteer, or don't do anything free. That's a wrong career advice. Nobody should give you that advice. So what I normally tell people is don't do it for a very long time. Don't. Just make sure that within that time that you have opportunity to do it, give it your best within that period. That's it. Don't do it for a very long time. So I believe you've learned a lot. I can see some people saying that they subscribe. Okay, that's more. Okay, so if you are yet to, if you've joined us and you are yet to subscribe, please hit that subscribe button and try and share this with people within your network, especially upcoming professionals. And if your interest is in medical writing, then you're in the right place. This is a channel you should be checking, because we also always have something for you. We also have health literacy videos for you. And if you're interested in learning about medical writing, we have our coaching programs that will run. I'll put up the charts right now on the chat box. And if we don't have any question, if you have any question, you can ask me. If you don't have, we'll call it a day. So thank you all for joining. Blessing, okay, that's Blessing Anthony. Okay, I think I've seen that. Thank you all for joining, and I believe your time wasn't wasted. Okay, so that's the link that I just shared if you're interested in medical writing. So make sure you subscribe, turn on your notification, because this kind of live, we'll be doing it once in a while. So once we have any health literacy topic or medical writing topic to dissect, we'll come up live and do that. So make sure you turn on your notification so that you always know when I come up. So till I see you again, bye, and keep on being the best of who you were made to be. See you.